Well, hello, everyone. This is Jill Hope, and I am so excited to chat about how to create more influence and more impact in your business. And to help with that conversation, I brought on Ben Gioia here. Ben has just written a book called The Influencer's Formula, and I'm really excited to talk to him today and also support you in getting yourself out there more, being seen and being heard in your business so that you can make a bigger impact on the world. So welcome, Ben.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. It's an honor and a pleasure to be back talking to you again, because this is not our first rodeo, as they say. And, also want to just give a shout out to my co-author for the book, Donna Kunde, because this is my fourth book, but this is the first time that I had the honor and pleasure of doing it with somebody. And it really helps to have a partner in crime with big projects. So a big shout out to Donna as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are better together, right? When
Yes.
you've got someone that can has complementary skills and gifts, and you can partner with them. So that's awesome. So hey, Donna, shout out from Jill as well.
Yes.
All right. Well, Ben, let's just hop into this. So, you've got this book, The Influencer's Formula, and we were talking before, and I was saying I've read a good chunk of the book, and I found it really interesting. There's some really intriguing ideas in there. But I also always go back to one of the things, when we talked before, something you said, and it like has always stayed with me. As a business owner, a lot of us think about like, oh, it would be really great to have a book. We've got a message. It's another way to share it and get out there. But you see overwhelm set in, and it's like, oh, but then how am I going to get it written? And how am I going to get it out there? And how will it actually even make me money? Or how much will it cost me? And so we have all these things that come up. And so it just kind of stops us in our tracks and we don't actually take the action. But you had said something that I just thought, oh my gosh, that is so like inspiring. You said something along the lines of that you can start impacting your business and growing your business with your book before you even write your book. And I'm like, wow, tell me more about that. So can you say a little bit about that for
Yeah,
our
thank you.
listeners?
I'd be happy to. And I was wondering what you were going to say, because I was like, oh, thank you for remembering something. And yeah, and that is a really important one. I say this to all my authors. I say this to everybody who will listen, right? This idea of leveraging your book or podcast for that matter, because that's what the Influencers Formula book that we're talking about, right, is talking about books and podcasts. So either way, leveraging the thing before it's done. And the way to do that is first and foremost, just think in terms of, if you say to somebody that you're the author of a forthcoming book or you're the creator of a forthcoming podcast, the person who's listening is going to start listening a little bit differently. Like they're going to make an assumption that you know something. Like, oh my God, you're writing a book. You must know something. There is just power in, especially books. Like books have this legendary quality, which is wonderful, a little strange, but wonderful for our purposes. And the way in a practical sense, the way that I have my authors actually leverage the book, not only saying, hey, I'm this forthcoming author, but I teach them in the book writing process to have conversations with their ideal clients about the book that they're writing, following a very specific process that I provide, because not only does that provide the lens for the book, right? It makes it easier to know what to put in the book. It makes it easier to know what language to use in the book, right? Because literally your clients are telling you the things, right? And if you do these conversations the right way, which really isn't hard, you're also laying the groundwork for that person to become a client or a strategic partner because you've begun or continued a relationship already merely by dint of having a conversation.
Yes. That's so interesting. And, one of the things you mentioned there about using their language. I mean, this is a place, as a business coach myself, this is a place where I see a lot of people really struggle. And I recognize it because I struggled there for a lot of for many, many years, is that we tend to want to speak about our process and our what we have and how we can help people, which is fine, but it's not really connecting with our ideal client. Like they don't really care what your process is. They have a problem and they want to get it solved. And they're thinking about it in a certain way. And if we don't understand how they're thinking about that problem and how it's actually affecting them and holding them back, I mean, they're not going to hear us enough to where they're going to step in and let us support them, right?
You're absolutely right, and I'm so glad you say that. And it's so funny because it's one of the biggest challenges in every single person's business, and it's been the challenge for hundreds of years probably at this point, right? And it's the challenge that we all struggle with, and very often, even when we know not to struggle with it anymore, we still struggle with it. Right? So if you're hearing this right now or watching this right now and going, yeah, that's me, no shame, no judgment, like this happens to all of us. And to Jill's point, really, really important, right? People want the goals, the outcomes, the benefits, right? They don't want the process or the method or the framework. Method, process, and framework are helpful, later on in the conversation or later on in the presentation, because it shows you know what you're talking about, right? Because then you're giving that person an understanding that you're an authority and that you're trustworthy and you have something that's accessible and makes sense. Like, absolutely, but you don't lead with that, right? Because that's almost like saying, if I were to say to you, hey, Jill, this is what you need to do, you'll be like, I don't need to do jack. Don't tell me what I need to do, right? But if I come saying, Jill, hey, I really understand your experience. Like, I know you're dealing with this and this is your challenge and this is what you want to happen. And I've been there too. And I've served people just like you, right? Then you're going to be like, yeah, you get me. I'm going to keep listening because now I'm starting to know, like, and trust you in a big, important way. And if you've not heard those three words before, those are three of the most important words in marketing and business, right? When we want people to say yes to us, right? They need to know us or feel like they know us. They need to like us. They need to trust us. And fourth important word, to see us as an authority or an expert, so they can confidently say yes to us.
Beautifully said. So, those that know and the like and the trust factor and that comfort in saying yes because they see us as an authority. I'm assuming that that's sort of like when you speak about influence, that's what you mean.
That is correct. Yeah, I like to. I when I wrote my second book, which was called Influence with a Heart, which is also the name of my business, I made my own definition of influence. I basically said, influence is inviting people to say yes, so it's good for them and good for you and ideally good for the planet, right? Like right there. And the more that we can invite people to say yes to us, the more we can transform their business and or life.
Yeah, and I love that how it's those three factors that you said. It's not just about what I can do for you, but it's also there's this big piece about like being authentic. And I mean, I know influence with a heart, like that's your whole thing. And that's one of the things that I love about you, Ben, is, you have this beautiful energy and you can tell that you're all about the heart, right? And, that comes, I think, from having a great connection to your own authenticity and a willingness to be able to share and be vulnerable. And, that's what really connects, hearts together, right? And then, the heart's what makes the decisions. It's not really the head. So can you talk a little bit about like how does authenticity come into play in your process and just, maybe your personal process or in how you work with people?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question with probably several hours worth of answers, but I'll do the short version. Yeah, so Jill, you've had this experience, and listeners and viewers, you've had this experience where you just meet somebody and they are so who they are, right? They're straight up. There's no what's the word? I can't think of the word right now. There's no show. There's nothing extra. They are who they are. They do what they say. They deliver what they promise to deliver. They walk the walk, talk the talk, that kind of thing. That is so incredibly attractive and attracting in terms of the knowing, liking, and trust. Authenticity, often in my experience and my recommendations, is very closely tied to vulnerability. Right? Being vulnerable is a way to be authentic. Being authentic is a way to be vulnerable, right? Being straight up with what's going on with you, even the quote unquote ugly stuff sometimes. I mean, you don't want to run around talking about how difficult things are every single moment in the public space, right? Because people get turned off by that. But you also want to be truthful and honor the fact that you're a human being. I'm a human being. We're human beings, and it's not all glitz and glam and this amazing success, right? I've struggled a bunch over the years. I did a bunch of drugs for about a decade and a half. I spent tons of money on drugs, right? Like, oh my goodness, what, if I had put that into savings, right? And, I'm not going to beat myself up about that, but I share this story with people. One, because there are other people who have dealt with addiction, and people who haven't dealt with addiction. They've dealt with something, they've struggled with something, they have gone from, what we can call mess to success, right? Or earned some kind of hard-earned wisdom. And those stories of transformation, of mess to success, hard-earned wisdom, they're very attractive to other people. Like, I mean, how much more authentic can you get, right? If, I'm saying like, hey, I was doing this, this, and this back then, thank goodness I didn't get killed or arrested, or killed and then arrested, right? So there is so much power in being you, and it gives the people that you're serving, whether you're speaking to one person or a group of people, it gives them permission and opportunity to step into that space as well. And the more authenticity, the more vulnerability we have, the more truth we have better leaders and better leadership in the world. And if you're listening right now and you're not thinking that you're a leader already, hey, you're a leader, right? You get to be that leader, even if you're just leading one person. And in this day and age, I would argue now more than ever, we need as many leaders stepping into that role of leadership, whatever that looks like, really now more than ever. So thank you for being a leader.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Like we need to take our role as the leaders that we are. I mean, there's so many people out there trying to get their thing going, and I agree with you. Like, we're all leaders. I mean, even if you're not trying to get a business going, you're a leader in your life, in your family, and you have a message. Like, we all have a message. Our life has a message, and one of the things that I've always heard and try to, use in my life is this idea of your mess is your message, right? Like, the biggest messes in your life, in there are the nuggets and the treasures that become your message later on, and how you can actually help people. So, and I know you're really good at helping people to, see what their stories are. And I know you talk about sharing the power of story a lot when you're, writing your book or, doing your podcast. Is there anything you want to say around that idea around your story or sharing story?
Yeah, thank you. This is another multi-hour topic. But yeah, just to remember some critical things about stories, right? Stories are the oldest form of human communication, or one of the oldest. I mean, before there were cave paintings, people were telling stories around the fire, and we think in story, we think in metaphor and analogy, we integrate information through story and through experience, right? Like, story is who and what we are. And when people ask me, well, how can I be more influential, and how can I bring more empathy into what I do? Because empathy is an important part of, the leadership, the story, the influence, right? I say just, do two things: share your story more and more often, and keep asking other people to share their story with you. And it's amazing what happens from there.
Nice. When you say ask others to share their story with you, what do you mean? People, ideal clients, and
ideal clients, partners, somebody that you've met, at a networking event or at a cocktail party, or sitting next to them on the plane. So what's your story, right? And it doesn't have to be their life story or their entire saga, right? But it's just, well, what's the story behind your book, or what's the story behind that event, or what's that story behind, that the image that's coming to me is like, that cherry red 66 Mustang, right? What's going on there? right? Because, we're curious to know often. And when people have an opportunity to share, it's beautiful for them. It's a gift to ask people for their story, and even more of a gift to listen really closely to what they say.
Yes, yes. That makes me think about when I was in my other business, when I had created a curriculum for kids that was helping them build, their self-esteem and their inner confidence and all of that. And one of the things that we would do is there every I guess session or module that we would teach them, there would be a series of questions at the beginning where the group would sit together and the facilitator would lead the questions, and it was asking kids questions about like, what do you think about this? How do you feel about this? And what was so powerful is I used to observe in these settings sometimes, and just being asked, what do you think when you're a 9-year-old kid in a classroom, like their face would just brighten up. And because usually they're just being told, do this, think this, follow this, memorize this. They're being told what to do as opposed to asking them to share, their thoughts on a subject. And I just thought it was just so beautiful to see that. And, it just, what you're saying is like, that's the most powerful way to connect, I think, is to, yeah, exactly what you said, ask them questions
Mhm.
and actually care about what the answers are, like really listen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's beautiful, beautiful. Well, one of the things I noticed as I was reading your book is you talk about this role of like meditation and using the faculty of imagination and the power of the subconscious mind, and how athletes they're always visioning and imaging what they want to happen. Can you talk a little bit about that when it comes to like a book writing and connecting and influencing people?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So what I've come to understand over the years, and I'm not a neurologist, although I play one on television. But that our brains don't understand the difference between the reality of doing something and the imagining of doing that thing, right? And when we couple that visioning, if you will, or that imagery or that imagination with feeling, with emotion, right? We put ourselves in the space of of creation. If you want to use the word manifesting, you can use that word too, but we make it much more likely for that thing to happen, right? Because we're in the space, we're acting as if, as you may have heard that phrase before, act as if it's going to happen, act as if you can't fail, right? Does that mean you're not going to be scared? No. You might be terrified, but still act as if, and also hold the space that it might not turn out exactly like you want. It might not turn out the way you want it for quite a few years, right? Who knows? But keep going into that space, and some of it is just because it's enjoyable, right? But the flip side, always be careful. Don't give yourself a hard time if it doesn't work in the way that you think it needs to work. By next week, right? There's the universe is a lot bigger than us being able to control on that level, right? So just be open to the possibility. So visioning is really powerful. Um, Imagination is really powerful. And I'm a big fan of meditation. I've been meditating for, goodness help me, 18 years at this point. Not always every day, right? But it's been a big practice in my life. And what I've come to understand, and this is really, really important. Psychologically, all of us, I'm not a psychologist either, right? But psychologically, for all of us, we have unconscious stuff, right? Unconscious stuff that got into the mix probably before we were verbal or just when we were starting to talk, right? Stuff that's deeply embedded that most of the time, regardless of how much we meditate, how much psychotherapy, how much like any kind of engagement we bring to bear on it, we're not going to get rid of it, right? It's not going to go away. And I think there's incredible power in understanding that, because you don't have to try to get rid of this thing anymore. You just basically you want to bring more and more awareness to your situation and notice like, oh, there's that story in my head, or there's that uncomfortable feeling that comes up when XYZ happens. And ultimately to recognize that none of it is personal, meaning you did not ask for it to come up. You're not being punished. It's not your fault, but you don't have to get engaged, right? You don't have to get involved in that story. And where I'm going with this is especially around book writing, because book writing, AKA taking your stand in and around something and bringing forth your message, it really stirs the pot. No matter how grounded you are and how adjusted you are, it's going to bring stuff up. Again, impersonal stuff, even if it feels personal, even if the memories are personal memories, it's still impersonal because you didn't ask. And there it is. So what do? You can get involved with it, fight against it, push it away, right? That just causes more suffering. Or, as I teach all my authors, you relax your head, relax your face, and smile and breathe, right? Because when that stuff comes up, what happens, regardless of what's going on in our heads, is that we get some kind of tension gets created, tension and tightness in the head, right? And the best thing to do is just relax. Now, you might have to relax over and over and over again, right? It doesn't mean that that thing is necessarily going to go away, but the more we smile, the more you smile, the more you relax, the more you practice, very important word, practice, not taking things personally, the easier it is to live your life happily, right? Not get hooked on what's happening inside, what's happening outside, and so much easier to get your book done, so much easier to have effective conversations that turn into clients and strategic partners, so much easier to influence things and people for the good, and so much easier to be the leader that you are.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I mean, we can't really move another person or influence them if we're caught up in our stuff, right? Because then we're focusing on us instead of focusing on them, which, I notice that happens to a lot of people. I mean, when we start to focus on our own stuff, like in a negative way, like in a way where it takes you out of the game and keeps you from moving forward and doing your work in the world, that's a trap. It's a huge trap. So I love what you're saying. That's a great way of looking at it. And for people to realize it's like just creating the awareness, but not getting drawn into it is so important. And knowing that it's not your fault. You don't have to push it away. It's just kind of like with fear, right? Like I was in a call with some clients a couple of weeks ago, and someone brought up this idea of fear. And this client said, well, I'm not fearless, but I can, I do things. And I'm like, well, that's the definition of fearless. It's like feeling the fear and then being able to do it anyways, right? Like that is fearless because we all have fears. So I love how, you're just pointing out this idea of just creating that awareness, but not having it dictate what you do, right?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And I want to just say it one more time, the smiling, the relaxing, the softening around that stuff, right? Because it's so easy to push against it, right? I mean, that's just what we have been taught to do our entire lives, most of us. Again, not your fault for being taught that, right? And you can't force a thought or an emotion out of yourself, right? But if you soften around it and try to just let it be over here, let it do its thing, it'll go away on its own sooner or later. It might take a little while, might not be fun while you're waiting, right? But you have a much higher probability of, of stepping away from that suffering. The more you smile, the more you don't take it personally, and the more you relax again and again and again and again and again.
And that's where meditation could probably come into play, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That inner relaxation. Yeah. Well, Ben, we've talked a bit about some of the ideas that you share in the book, but do you want to talk a little more about your book, The Influencer's Formula? What do you want us to know about that?
Yeah, thank you. So just the influencers formula, just the nutshell is that we wrote a book about creating what we call a global thought leadership masterpiece with a podcast or a book. And If the word global sounds too big and overwhelming, that's fine. Just think of it as a thought leadership masterpiece, right? That your podcast, your book, or both can really help you stand out as an influencer, help you attract clients more easily, help you make that difference and serve your people more readily. So that's a big part of it. What we go back to this analogy over and over in the book of a champagne glass pyramid, right? If you've ever been to a wedding and you see the champagne glass pyramid, or maybe you've seen a YouTube video, right? Here's this triangular looking three-dimensional thing, which is why it's a pyramid, of a bunch of glasses, and they fill them up with champagne, but they don't fill up the glasses one by one, right? They just pour the champagne into the top glass. That cascades over to the next glasses, to the next glasses, to the next glasses. I mean, first of all, it looks really cool. But the parallel here is, if you think of your book or your podcast as that top champagne glass, and whatever you're pouring in, whether it's champagne or non-alcoholic cider, whatever you prefer, right? That is, it's your wisdom in the vehicle of your book or your podcast. And then that's what can turn into, depending who you talk to, 25, 30, 50 other types of content, right? If you're starting with a book, it can become a podcast, a training, a bunch of blog posts, all sorts of social media, an audio book, right? A training, a webinar, a masterclass, right? You can just keep going down the list. You can license the content, and because you're coming from this singular source, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, you've done a bunch of the things further down the line, so to speak, automatically. And what Donna and I repeat often in the book, remind our readers in the book, is that if you've done the book right, meaning that you've connected it to what your ideal clients really want and need, because you've spoken to them, and gotten their language and really understood them and helped them realize that you understand them, right? If you do that stuff, write a book with all of that in mind, you've essentially done 80% of a podcast, content-wise, and vice versa. Right? So this idea of this very high leveraged action is really, really important. And then the other part is just, is looking at things like how to then take the next steps, whether it's turning your podcast into a TV talk show, right? Bringing a video component in, because a lot of people watch videos, right? A lot of people watch videos with captions. So that's a really powerful way to reach more people with your message without necessarily doing extra work. I mean, a lot of people record podcasts by recording videos, right? Because it's very easy to turn a video into a podcast, into a bunch of clips, right? Into a bunch of different kinds of text. We also talk about things in the book around publishing, right? Making the right choices about publishing, because most people think historically, oh, I need to work with a traditional publisher, right? And traditional publisher meaning, right? Oh, the person who I have to get an agent and put a book proposal and hope they choose me, right? So for people, Jill, like you, me, the people who are listening, watching, our colleagues, 99% of the time, we do not want a traditional publisher. Let me say that again. We do not want a traditional publisher. You do not want a traditional publisher, because traditional publishers, when they take on your book, you sign over your intellectual property to them. Right? So first, immediately, you don't own your book anymore. So you don't have creative control, which is crazy. They might give you some level of input, but again, it comes to them. Do you want to spend time writing a book proposal and getting an agent, or you just want to get your book in the world? Right? I would say choice B. And a lot of traditional publishing companies, this is totally crazy, require the author to sell a minimum number of books in X amount of time as soon as the book is released. So let's say, for example, the author is required to sell 4,000 books in the first 2 months, right? For some authors, that might be a lot. For some authors, it might not be that many. But either way, let's say they only sell 2,000 of the 4,000. Contractually, with most publishing companies, traditional publishing, the author will be required to buy back the unsold books from the publisher at retail. So imagine all of a sudden that you owe your publisher $20 times 2,000 books, $40,000 because you didn't sell enough books. Do you want to even put yourself anywhere near that situation? No, right? And traditional publishers these days still want you to be in charge of your marketing and handle your marketing. So what we all want, 9 times out of 10, I would even say 99 out of 100, is professional self-publishing. So yes, self-publishing, but done by a professional. So you can have a super high quality book, distributed around the world to 40,000 places, go internet, right? And a team that helps you get the stuff done so you can focus on serving more clients and doing more speaking and making a bigger impact with your message.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That is crazy
It
about
is.
the traditional publishing route. Wow. And I know it can take a really long time too to get your book out there,
Yeah, with a traditional publisher, it certainly can. With professional self-publishing, like my methodology and the publisher that I work with, I say to my authors, if you follow my process and do exactly what I say, right, that you can have a manuscript done in as little as 5 weeks, right? You can have a book complete in 3 months, ready for the publisher. And then, 6 to 7 months, you go from idea to published book out in the world, right? Why wait years when you can get it out in a few months? And like we were saying at the beginning of the conversation today, as soon as you have that idea for the book, start leveraging it, because you can attract clients and strategic partners. I have clients who've gotten 5-figure speaking gigs, 6-figure consulting. Somebody was asked to speak at Google, right? All of these things happened before their books were done or just right upon publication. Like somebody said, oh, we know you're doing this thing, or we just saw your book. Come hang out with us. So you can't beat a book, regardless of how many other people are publishing books every day, right? Nobody can publish the book that you will publish.
Well, and I guess I don't want to say short circuiting the process, but I mean, in a way you are, if you're having those conversations and leveraging the book before it comes out, but your book's going to be out in about 6 months, like even like from the beginning, right? Like it's not that far away. Whereas if you're having those conversations and maybe you get a speaking gig, but the book's not going to be out for a couple of years, like, there's a kind of a disconnect there. So as an entrepreneur myself, the faster, the better, because things are changing so fast. And if you can get your message out there quicker, like, why would you not do that, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there are people who are waiting for you right now. And there's some people who are only literally waiting for you, right? I mean, because sometimes there are other options. There's other service providers. There's other coaches. There's other consultants. That could be true, but in certain circumstances, some people will only end up working with you because you are the right and best person for them, right? So, hurry up and serve them.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, I want to ask you where to get your book, but before I do, I have one more question that's just been mulling around in my mind. And it is this, Ben. What would you say is your special sauce that kind of sets you apart? I've seen other coaches that help people get their books out there and things, and they have their own process, but what do you think sets you apart in that area?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. So it's a couple of things. One is the conversation process that I have my authors do with their ideal clients to zero in on the book, because not only does it provide the lens for the book and provide the language for the book, but it also lays the groundwork for the revenue to start coming in, right? I've not met another book coach who does that. I mean, I hope more do. But I'll be that person for at least a little while longer. Thank you very much. And then I have a super expedited process to get the book done in as little as 5 weeks because I make use of things like providing a blueprint, right? Hey, author, just put things where they need to go in the architecture, right? Because I like to say to my authors, I don't want you thinking about logistics of a book. I want you focusing on the content and the people that you're serving, and then just put the things in the right places so you can get it done. And then the last part for me is structured dictation, right? Because Jill, you may or may not know this. Listeners, you may or may not know this. You can speak 1,200 words in 7 minutes, right? 1,200 words in 7 minutes is 5% of a 25,000 word book. Holy cannolis, right? So you can literally, and I don't recommend this because, you do want to develop a book thoughtfully, but on that logic, you could literally have a manuscript done in just over 2 hours, right? And I don't quite recommend this because you need to talk to your people, you need to develop your content, you need to let your subconscious cook on some of those ideas and, bring beautiful insights through. And you can get it done real fast and maintain really high quality as you're getting it done expeditiously.
That's really cool. That's awesome. That's some good sauce there, Ben.
Thanks. And I had to use a big vocabulary word at the end because we're talking about books.
Right. Love it. So tell us, where can we get your book, The Influencer's Formula? Where, how do we get our hands on it?
Yeah, thank you. So the easiest way is to go to influencersformula.com. Once again, influencersformula.com. There is a link to go get the book there. And there are also some really fabulous resources that you can get by entering your name and email address. So super valuable, immediately applicable business resources. And the link for the book is right there. One link that will take you to your best place to buy the book, no matter where you are in the world.
Fabulous. Ben, is there anything else you want to share with us today?
Thank you. Just that I really encourage, if you're listening right now, get your book done, get your podcast done, right? Get your next book done if it's time. There's no reason to wait. People need your help. And, and I say this because I was a hospice volunteer for several years. You don't know how long you're going to be around, right? So take your shot, right? Make every day worth living and make part of that bringing forth your message through your book or podcast, because you'll be so happy that you did, and you will change businesses and lives with what you're bringing forth.
Great way to bring us in for a landing, Ben. So that's influencersformula.com, correct?
Correct. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, everyone, go and grab Ben's book. I'm going to finish reading it later today. I'm very excited. I'm loving it. And I have started checking out some of the additional resources, Ben. So fabulous resources that go along with this book. Wow. So get the book. If you've ever wanted to write a book, grab this one. It'll make the process a whole heck of a lot easier and tell you all about how to create great leverage doing so for your business and for your ideal clients to be able to be served by you. So thank you for being here, Ben. It's been a pleasure, as always, to chat with you, and I'm wishing you great success with the book.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's so great to be here, and thanks for doing all the amazing things you're doing in the world.
All right, we'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Bye for now.